think that might be my cue. Well, I'm going to start. So hopefully we're good. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Journeying Through the Shadows of Darkness and Light with Reverend Sue Frederick, ordained Unity Minister, Master Numerologist, Soul Regression Therapist, and Intuitive Coach. Welcome.
Oh, it's
Sue.
such a pleasure to be here.
I know, fellow Southern girl, which
That's right.
I love that.
Right.
We'll talk more about that in a second. Okay, so y'all, I'm Eden Koz, live event host for Humanities Team. And let me go ahead and put this out there. This is my first time doing this, so please have some grace with me. Okay, so Humanities Team is a 501c3 nonprofit organization whose mission is to make conscious living pervasive. I knew I was going to have a hard time with the word pervasive worldwide by 2040. And I'm coming live from coming live from Ohio. And Sue, you're in Arizona right now?
I'm absolutely in Arizona, and we're finally getting down to 100 degrees instead of 115. Woohoo!
Okay, your world is so different than mine. So okay, so I want to welcome Reverend Sue's audience, the Sign Network, those streaming live through Humanities Team, their Facebook page, Humanities Team YouTube channel, and Stream Plus members who are here in the green room with us. Hello, welcome. And because this is a live program, please feel free to put comments or questions in the chat so we can deliver the appropriate and beautiful ones to Reverend Sue. Okay, I think I'm going to read your bio now. You ready?
Perfect. I'm ready.
Okay, let me get ready for this. Reverend Sue Frederick is an intuitive coach, ordained Unity minister, soul regression therapist, master numerologist, a sacred channel, and clairaudient. Described, and I read this slowly, described as a breath of fresh air and an enlightened new perspective, she has been featured, here we go, in the New York Times, Real Simple, Complete Woman, Woman's World, Yoga Journal, Natural Health, the Denver Post, New York Metro, and at venues like the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York, and Loyola. I know, say that for me, Reverend Sue.
Loyola.
Thank you, University in New Orleans, which is where you are from,
Mhm.
combining a unique gift of powerful intuition, channeled wisdom from departed loved ones, and practical career know how. Sue has been a guest on over 200 radio shows and numerous TV shows, including Bridging Heaven and Earth. Her best selling book, I See Your Job, Your Dream Job, A Career Intuitive, shows you how to discover what you were put on earth to do, change the lives of thousands of people around the world since its publication in September 2009. Other published books include Through a Divine Lens, Practices to Quiet Your Ego and Align with Your Soul, including a Sacred Numerology workbook. Okay, and they're both available on Amazon. Man, what you think about all that?
Well, I signed up for a certain birth path according to numerology that's all about work. And some of you know what I'm talking about, that 22-4 path. And when you sign up for that and your soul comes here, you feel like you've never accomplished enough. And so, here I am in my 70s and I'm working on another book because I haven't gotten it done yet.
It is so nice to hear you say that because it's the same thing with me. Well, what can I do next? And I'm not done yet. So it's this push and pull of do it and be calm and be in the moment. All right, the first thing I want to go into is what I've also discovered, aging and saging, and how I'm starting to fit in that category, how much wisdom and how much experience that people, especially within your life, have. So I want to start back in the 80s, if you don't mind, and talking about Paul and rock climbing and your best friend and how this drove you to spirituality. I know you shared the story a lot. Do you mind sharing it?
Oh,
It's
yeah. And
wonderful.
it's funny that you bring it up because last night I was dreaming a lot about Paul, and I was back in that moment of being in an apartment with him in Boulder, Colorado. He was dying of colon cancer, and it was 1980. And it was me and a hospice nurse showing up occasionally, and I was 29 years old. And I was angry at God. And I say that now for all of you who
Yeah.
face grief and feel that you're angry that a loss, a devastation would happen to you. And all I can say is that Paul's exit was so conscious and so aware that he lifted me up out of this earth perspective and showed me, even in his moment of crossing, he showed me his soul. And he took me on what's called a shared death experience, where he was feeding me wisdom for weeks after. Like I would drop something and he would say, divine order rules the universe. There are
Okay.
no
And
mistakes.
this had never happened to you before. And Paul was, how long was Paul your husband? How long had y'all been married?
We'd been in love for many years, but we'd only been married for a couple years because, we were in our 20s and
Yeah.
we thought we were invincible. We were mountain climbers and all of that. So it was designed by my soul and his soul for our purposes of awakening.
So when you started going through that and having these experiences, were you just like, what is this? Holy smokes. How did you sit with that initially?
Well, as a kid, I was always very intuitive, and I'd come to the breakfast table and share a dream that would come true later, and my family would poo-poo it. It was back in the 60s and the 50s. And my mother was French Creole, and she came from a family of very intuitive women. And she
Wow.
would tell me, that's not going to serve you because women it's hard to imagine this, but back in the 40s and 30s, if women started acting precognitive or any of that, they could get put in the mental hospital. I'm
Mhm.
serious. And so my mother learned watching that these were dangerous gifts that we had. And so she just cautioned me my whole life, don't tell people these things. But of course, I couldn't hold back. And so I was a pretty weird kid growing up.
Yeah, you were normal. People just didn't know. Okay, so keep going, please. I love that.
So in my 20s, when I was trying to figure out how to be in this earth world because I was so different, my perspective on things was so different. I was so intuitive and sensitive. I say that to all of you sensitive souls because that's your gift, whether you feel that way about it or not. And people would go, Sue, you're too sensitive, and I'd feel like, gosh, I'm so flawed. So I was trying, I was being an outward bound instructor to lead people to overcome their fears, just trying to figure out where do I fit in this
Yeah.
crazy world. And that's where I met Paul. And Paul taught me everything. He was my biggest soul agreement in this life. He made me understand that I was lovable for the first time. He gave me unconditional love. He was immersed in spiritual wisdom from the time I met him. And he was my person then. And when he suddenly got sick and was dying, I was so lost. And I mean, I've often said that I probably wasted a couple years, 3 years of my life being just angry, And yet I tell grieving people, if anger gets you out of bed in the morning, use it. It's just energy, and sometimes it helps you get up and get going when you've been facing devastation. And in that anger, I started asking questions like, why did this happen to a beautiful young soul
Yeah.
and a loving person? Why did he have to suffer so much? And most importantly, why do I have to stay here? What is my purpose? And those questions led me to numerology, which I've studied since 1980 and I just cherish as a guidepost for all of us. And also spiritual traditions. I've studied Buddhism, Hinduism. I'm an ordained unity minister. I grew up Catholic. I have studied almost every religious and spiritual path there is to come to what resonates for me as the truth. And I had to do that. I couldn't be here without finding those answers.
Well, I can at this close to Paul, what your best friend.
Oh, I
Talk about
know,
that. I
Chrissy.
mean, man.
I feel like if Chrissy hadn't crossed the year after, I
Jeez.
might have been able to kind of ignore the big lesson and just kind of carry on and try to have a normal life. But Chrissy had been my childhood best friend and the person you process life with. And we had so many connections. And she had even flown out to help me after Paul crossed and was kind of helping me get back on my feet. And then she flew home and was diagnosed with leukemia and died a year later. Now, that one put me under. That's when I really caved into my dark night of the soul and my anger at the universe. And as I tell people jokingly, I sold all, it's true, I sold all my belongings and moved to Mexico because I didn't want to understand the language of anyone talking around me and I didn't want to have to repeat my story. And then I found out, oops, wherever you go, there you are.
You can't run away from
You can't
yourself.
run away from
Dadgummit.
it.
All right. Well, talk about, if you wouldn't mind, how this opened you up to numerology and how did that come your way?
Yeah. That was such a blessing. And I thank Paul for all of this. I had a girlfriend who was so beautiful and already very aware of numerology and things like that. And I had kind of danced in astrology in my 20s, as most
Mhm.
people do. Um, but I'd never known anything about numerology. And my girlfriend said, I think you need a session with a numerologist. And she gifted it to me. And that numerologist sat with me and in 1 hour changed my life because she explained to me Paul's path, what he came to do and learn, my path, what I came to do and learn, what our soul agreement was, and why he left early, why I was every question I'd been asking. She could tell me what it was, the answer through numerology. And I became obsessed then. And I was 1980, so there was no internet. I went to the bookstore. There was one book on numerology. And so I started developing a notebook where I would ask everybody their date of birth. And I still have that notebook because I would stay up late at night going, gee, now that person is an eight path. How does that play out in their life? You know, what are they trying to learn and what are their
Yeah.
gifts? And by the time I filled up that notebook, I was really beginning to communicate with the numbers. And since then, I've had Pythagoras and George Harrison and all sorts of spirits in my dreams teaching me more and more about the numbers.
I know that you had done traditional therapy and that
Oh, yeah.
that wasn't successful. Can you talk about that a little
Oh
bit?
my gosh. And please forgive me, any therapists who are listening, because I know that nowadays therapy is a lot more
Yes.
enlightened. But back then, you know, I was so broke and I put together enough money to go see a therapist. And she basically said, you know, you're young, you're going to find another husband. You've really got to put this behind you. It was part of me. There was no way that story was going to go behind me. You
Mhm.
know, I
Yeah.
had experienced Paul's soul leaving his body. I had had him come to me in bed the night after he crossed and wrap his arms around me in a way that I couldn't dismiss as, you know, my imagination. He was so present and he was teaching me so much. And here was this therapist going, you know, do you need some medication to get your feet back on the ground? Unfortunately, I said no to that, but that was
Yeah.
pretty much all the therapist wanted to do was medicate me so I would stop crying and behave.
And what you went through, especially with your husband and being in your 20s, because again, in your 20s,
Yeah.
people traditionally, or you want to say, don't pass away, and having
Right.
him and then your best friend
I know.
simultaneously. I
I
mean,
didn't fit in the world after that. And it's a
I,
blessing to not fit
right.
in the world. And I say that to all of you who feel you don't fit in this world. Good. That means
Mhm.
you're meant to be a teacher or a healer because you can see beyond this world.
Ah, can you explain? I love, there was one video I watched of you explaining the basics of numerology. Can you do that here? And yeah, just tell us more about it.
So let's pretend we're all hanging out in the divine realms where everything is pure love and highest consciousness, and our higher self, our enormous soul, lives
Okay.
in those divine realms, not our tiny little bodies that we have to squeeze into on the earth realm. And in that wisdom, we're all sitting around going, all right, we have this grand experiment happening on earth where humans are incarnating there and we're trying to shift the consciousness there and lift the energy there. So who wants to volunteer to go down there and be a part of that? And, we just raised our hands, and our teachers said, our guide said, but when you get there, you forget everything. And we went, oh, no problem. And they said, oh, and you're going to make hard agreements that your heart will be broken to keep you growing and learning while you're there and finding unconditional love on earth. And we just went, no problem, because we were not in our human selves in that divine realm. So we didn't know pain. And
Yeah.
then we chose a birth path, and that birth path was going to bring to us our perfect lessons that our soul needed to learn, just like a college course. Like, I'm going to major in this, so I'm going to develop my inner strength and my outer strength and my endurance, and then my ability to be a consciousness shifting teacher on earth. Oh, you want to take the 22-4 birth path? Okay. And these are the perils of it. These are the gifts of it. And I remember, I even have a memory of my guide as I was about to jump into this life and be born, him saying to me, and he was a male energy. He said, um, just remember, you have a courageous heart, and that will help you find your way through it.
Oh,
And I jumped into this life, and just like all humans here, I have spent a lot of time complaining and crying and being angry about this world until finally I reached a point where I say, well, that hasn't helped. So, how can I really step up to the light of my path and what I'm here to do and be?
oh, and it's really nice how you also describe it. This ain't easy. This coming down, I say down, but coming into this earthly world and going through these experiences. I'm sure many people here in the green room that I'm seeing their beautiful faces have experienced some major. We've all, at least most of us, have experienced some sort of
Yeah.
tragedy. Can you go to your 2014 out of body experience and talk
Oh,
about that?
yes. So this is the graphic behind me that I love to use. My husband is a graphic designer, and when I came out of the experience, I was trying to explain it to him, and he created this design from what I
Oh,
was telling him. But I got sick and I left my body, and I've always had this easy way of leaving my body and having an out of body experience and then remembering it when I come back in.
mm.
And so in 2014, I was really sick. And one night, I completely left my body, and the angels, these beautiful, loving beings, were holding me kind of in outer space, looking at the galaxy. And they showed me planet Earth. And they said, do you see all of that light shooting up from Earth? Those are human beings opening their hearts and reclaiming unconditional love on Earth. And the light is always winning. You have to trust us when we tell you that. They were telling me all night. The light is always winning. The love is always winning, even when it seems that things are very dark on Earth. And they were showing me it was like a moving body of light moving around the earth, waking up souls, and one soul sparking another soul to awaken and filling in all the dark places on earth. And all night they were like, you have to remember this. You have to teach it. You have to share it, that the light wins, the love wins, and that this is a divine order universe, no matter how it looks up close. And I remember at the time I woke up and thinking, well, it's the world isn't such a terrible place. It's 2014, and then we had COVID and all the conflict that has happened in the world
Mm.
since then. And now every day I have to look at this and remember, oh, right, right, right. I can't be upset about these events. I have to really try to see that bigger picture. And that has guided so much of my work. including I have this angelic ministry class that I teach where I take people to really look at their life and the world from this heavenly view. And you know what, Eden, that's really
What?
the only way we heal here. It's really the only way we find our peace and our love in the midst of pain, grief, conflict, is by lifting out of the human mind and realigning with that angelic view, that soul view of the light. And we can all do that. And it's not as hard as we think when we're here.
And tag on to that, that there is this huge human evolution that's going on right now, and again, it's being presented with extreme chaos. Where again, finding the polarity of it. Am I going to be okay with all this? And what you just said was really magical. How what going into more hope for the world, even though a lot of people are looking at the world right now, just going, what is this? Yet communicating it's all going to be okay and the light is there at any moment. Can you give us some more
Yeah.
inspiration with
Well,
that,
one
because
of
it's
the
hard?
one of the metaphors I like to use is about giving birth. And many of us here are women and we understand about giving birth
Yeah.
that, no child comes into this earth without pain. It's part of the birthing process. And whenever we personally go through a rebirth of our own journey on earth, there's pain involved. I mean, if we're
Mm.
just having a big party down here, which actually nobody is, but if we're just cruising through, then why would we ask the important questions? Who am I? Why am I here? What is the purpose of life? Those are the questions we're supposed to be asking here, because the minute we do, we start seeing, we get lifted up to hear these messages and to see these visions. And anybody right now who's looking at the news or the world or conflicting family, conversations, knows that when we're in the detail of life here on earth, the minutia of it, the ideas, all of that, we're just going to be in conflict. But if now humanity is being called to lift up to the soul's view and say, we're all players in this game on purpose. We all came to help each other wake up. You can think of it as a Shakespeare drama. What costume are you wearing in this
Yeah.
lifetime? Who were the players who agreed to be the evil kings, or the evil queens? Who are the people who agreed to stir up the darkness so it could be brought into the light? Now, suddenly, we're able to look at it in a more loving, compassionate way. And the goal of human evolution on Earth is to embody that compassion here on Earth.
Nicely put. I want to go ahead to one of your clips at this point. So, Reverend Sue's Humanity Stream Plus Masterclass, and we're going to talk more about this too, how to get through the dark night of the soul, which basically you could say on earth, everyone is doing that right now. And her
Right.
other, yes, her other Humanity Stream Plus Masterclasses, Sacred Numerology, and Your Life Through a Divine Lens. Excuse me for a second. So, in this one, if I have this correct, you describe the difficulty each of us would have without compassion going through the dark night of the soul. All right, play that clip, would you?
If we didn't each dip into the dark nights of our soul, we would have a hard time with compassion. We would see somebody else going through pain and we go, well, they need to get over that, right? I mean, there are people here on earth who think that anytime anybody is struggling with pain, emotional or physical or any kind, spiritual, that's their problem, that they're here to win and make money. And if they're not doing that, they're worthless. Well, wait till they have a dark night of the soul, because they'll be looking at it differently. We come here not to win, we come here to love, to open our hearts profoundly, not only to ourselves as souls on a hard journey here, but to each other in our darkest nights, in our moments of pain, to be able to say, I see you, Susie. I got you, and your son has you, and all the angels are around you. You are not alone. And even if we have to dip into that dark night, into the grief and the pain and the fear, it's okay. We're on the human realm. I tell you what, there is nobody, maybe the Dalai Lama, but I'm not even sure, who does not have negative human emotions here on Earth. So, get over thinking that you should just live in the light 24/7. If you achieve that, I always joke, it means you're done, you're out of here. You'll instantly be lifted up and taken off. And actually, the children who leave early, they are so highly evolved. In fact, often they'll look troubled on earth, but it's because they are angelic souls. They have a hard time being on earth. They didn't come here to stay long. They came here to wake everybody up and leave. So, we have to quit judging anything about anyone who exits or how they exit or when they exit, and just instead say, oh, soul plan well done, life well lived. Now let me focus on my own and how to live up to my greatest potential here and what is mine to do moving forward. Those are the only things we need to be thinking about and questioning.
Oh, yeah, that was
It's
good
funny how
stuff.
I say that like it's so easy, right?
Well, when you get through it and you look back on it, it's like, oh, look what I did. That was sure hard. But on the
Right.
other side, okay, Janie, I hope I'm saying your name right, has a comment. She says, thank you, Reverend Frederick. I've been struggling with anger and not fitting in since the loss of my spouse this year. Numerology has been snagging, I love that word, snagging my attention lately. Woo, look at
Oh,
there. Can you tell us, well, obviously with Paul and your best friend, tell us about your dark night of the soul. Have you had several? How would you quantify
yeah. Well,
that?
I think we all have several, when we look
Mhm.
back, and numerology lays those out for us because numerology shows us our individual 9-year reinvention cycles that we all go through. And one of the fun things we do in my classes is put your birth year at the beginning of your chart, and each person can do this and see every time they hit an end of a cycle what was going on in their life, and they'll go, oh wow, I got divorced that year, or I got went bankrupt, or I got fired. And they'll say, gee, I thought I did something wrong, and now I see that was part of my soul's plan for awakening me. It hit at the end of a cycle. So we all have many of those, and they serve our growth because that's when we pay attention again and we ask the hard questions. But I kind of had this idea, and I think some of my friends understand that, after we get wise and we've been doing this work and meditating and teaching, that, maybe things just are going to cruise for a while. It
Ooh.
makes me laugh because, I was cruising along here and I suddenly ended up in the hospital with a diagnosis of colon cancer last April. And, I've been Miss Healthy. I'll tell you what, I was a health icon in the natural health industry. I wrote for magazines, I wrote books about it. I was the one talking about preventing cancer by eating healthy and all of this stuff. So, big joke on me that suddenly I'm diagnosed with the same illness that I was still traumatized from watching Paul die from. But the universe has a plan in everything. So, when this recent dark night of the soul happened, the first thing my guides told me, and Paul told me in spirit, and my dad and Chrissy, was don't make a story about this. You don't know where
Mm,
this is going to take you yet. Keep your heart open and
be
walk
calm.
through it and ask
Okay.
the right questions. And so there I was being diagnosed with colon cancer. And fortunately, I had done enough work that I knew that the time I wanted to spend being angry or upset was just not going to help me a lot. So I needed to kind of go on with my tools and get into shifting my frequency, talking to the angels, and asking why this was happening. And as I began navigating that, I was so lifted up through the whole entire experience, including surgery and hemorrhaging and all kinds of drama that unfolded. And I'm here to tell you today that it was probably the greatest dark night of my soul and shifted my work and my life and everything up to a higher frequency, which is the purpose of our dark nights of the soul.
How did you, let me see how to phrase this question. Okay, knowing that you had expressed that you were a health icon, okay, and then getting a diagnosis that basically most people would be like, well, that oh, you were full of it, Reverend
Right.
Sue, in a sense. And then to
Well,
also have the same diagnosis that Paul had.
right, I know.
So
Well, what
how
I
did
was told is that this was an opportunity for me to heal a trauma that I had
okay.
not yet fully let go of in this lifetime. And here I
Uh,
am in my 70s. All of that happened to me in my 20s. And yet I had a physical trauma. Like I'd walk into a hospital to visit a girlfriend or something,
yeah,
and I would feel I couldn't breathe. My throat would get constricted, and it would have nothing to do with that girlfriend. It would have
yeah.
everything to do with my past memories of Paul suffering. And boy, he walked the suffering journey like nobody I've ever seen. And partially it was the 70s, and the world didn't yet know how to deal with cancer patients as well. But I had this lingering trauma in my body. And, I do Reiki healing. Like I'm very aware, but it was still there. And this opportunity, even I found a surgeon by following my intuition. I interviewed a number of surgeons until one felt right to me because
Yeah.
that's how our intuition helps us. Um, this surgeon said to me, she said, I've looked at your records. I see that you have PTSD from your first husband dying from colon cancer. I want you to know this experience will be completely different for you, nothing like Paul's, and it will heal your PTSD. And when she said those words, I was like, I'm all in. I don't care what you
Mhm.
do to me. Let's do it.
Okay, and not to talk about me, but I'll add into this because what I feel Reverend Sue is talking about. So I had so same thing. I was very spiritual, connected, healthy thoughts, healthy living. I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer in 2016. It was not that. 2 years of healing, and it was one of these things that I needed as well in terms of elevating me, lifting me up. So and this is a great transition into victimhood because in both of these experiences, you and I could have been like, oh, what's happening to me? And knowing that also as we go through this evolution on this earth, I feel like we are really going to be leaving victimhood. Uh, and knowing it's so easy to step in that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, but I also want to say to everybody here, don't beat yourself up
Yeah,
if you
that
find
too.
yourself in the victimhood state of mind, because I do believe as long as we're carrying these bodies and we're in the human realm, the energy here is so dense
Yeah.
and so negative so much of the time. And our bodies are so constricted. It's so hard to get in touch with our entire higher soul when we're in these limited bodies. So the victimhood story is a universal. I mean, go watch some Shakespeare plays and you'll see how Shakespeare played that out on the stage. There's always going to be people feeling like victims, even if they're kings of the universe.
Mhm.
And so as we begin to shift this, I think one of our first steps is I forgive myself for the times when I have felt like a victim, and I allow myself to love on me for how hard I've tried to shift into a different perspective. The minute we even say that or ask for help with that, we're lifted up to a higher frequency of understanding and wisdom. We can't deny our humanity here. We can't say, gee, I've never been felt like a victim and I've never been angry at anybody and I've never hated on anybody. You're lying. This is a human realm. We're going to feel all of that stuff here. And it's part of our learning. It's part of the resistance we've got to push against. How can you heal grief in somebody if you've never let yourself feel that devastating pain yourself? So we have to feel it to heal it, and then we got to ask for help shifting up into that higher perspective.
Well, and you personally, having been through these major, let's call it grief experiences. And then with the cancer, it allows you, which is the same with me, to relate to people when they come to you and basically tell you a story and you go, I've been there. I feel you. I mean, that is just
I have a
wow.
girlfriend. I have the best girlfriends. And one of my girlfriends said to me when I was diagnosed, she said, Boy, Sue, you just decided you were going to take on everything in this life. And I was like, yeah, like I surrender. Like, can't we just cruise now for a little while? But the thing I know
Oh,
about it is the more advanced souls, or even we can put a different word, the more hungry to grow
mm,
our soul is here on earth, the more we're going to have these challenges because we're walking through them, finding awareness, finding love in them. And then we get to go and share that. We're all here to teach others what we've learned in our moment of darkest pain. Or why would we be going through it if it's only so that we can help others?
whew. Well, my soul must be really, really hungry.
Yeah.
Okay, with this, I want to go into another clip. All right, so we're going to go back to the Humanity Stream Plus masterclass that you did, How to Get Through the Dark Night of the Soul. This clip is about kind of what we talked about. What is my soul trying to learn from this? Than to live in victim. Oh, no, no, not that one. I'm sorry. This would be better. Okay, the one where you explain how shifting your frequency up and away from fear, anger, and doubt reveals the pathway through pain. All right, got that right. Let's go.
Just remember, if you are thinking nothing but fearful, negative thoughts about what's happening, that's totally understandable. That's part of the human journey. But your higher self, your own divine energy is going, this is the way through. You agreed to this, and you would never have agreed to it unless you knew your soul could get through this with love and for a higher purpose. So remember, shifting your frequency up away from the fear, the anger, and the doubt reveals that pathway through the pain. Fear is never real. It's a mind killer. We all know that. But how do we shift up from it when we get a diagnosis of cancer or a loved one crosses over? So there are three very easy energy shifters. I've taught these for many years, and they're so easy, and we can bring them into every moment of a situation. And one is love. So, for example, we can love on somebody just soul to soul, unconditional love. I'm not talking about loving a person's personality or even their human self or their human form, but seeing beyond that and seeing the beautiful soul that lives inside of all of us. Just sending unconditional love. So when I was in the hospital getting that diagnosis, every healthcare worker who came in or nurse, I used it as an opportunity to lift up out of my own pain and fear and just send them so much love. And I would say, hey, tell me about your life. Tell me about your family. And then I could love on them and hear their story, and it would just shift my frequency up so much. It's the difference between focusing on our pain and fear versus shifting that energy and sending out unconditional love to anyone who walks in the room. That raises our frequency so high that now we are in a lofty state of surrender and gratitude. That's the next one, gratitude. Really saying, I am so grateful for even the smallest moment of comfort right now. So, for example, if you can eat clear liquids, which is all I could eat for a while, then you love on that broth. You do whatever it takes to be grateful for that broth that you get to eat or for that water that you get to drink. Or if there's nothing like that around, then focus on a flower or the sky outside at the window and find one thing to be grateful for and say, Oh, I am so grateful to be looking at this beautiful flower. I am so grateful to be tasting this broth. I am so grateful to be seeing the sun in the window or the sky. Oh, I am so grateful that a friend is going to come see me today. Those little gratitude moments raise our frequency. They shift us out of the fear and again align us with highest self where we get our answers, our real answers.
I think in that you talked about three things. We got love and gratitude. Was one missing?
Yeah, humor. Let me
Ah,
talk about the humor. That's my favorite one.
well, isn't that perfect? Yes, please.
I am fortunate because I grew up in a completely dysfunctional family, but the one thing we could all do together was laugh. My parents loved to laugh, and
Ah,
no matter how terrible things would get in our family, we could crack each other up. And I'm so grateful for that because that humor is a way to shift to a higher frequency and see it differently, and to really see the absurdity of this human life. And so anybody who knows me will tell you I love well-written comedy movies or well-written comedy, TV shows because they get us laughing and get us really thinking about a higher frequency thought than in our little victimhood human story. Um, when I was diagnosed, and I've used this tool so much. I mean, even when Paul died and I was turning 30, I had a girlfriend who was so funny, and she knew, Chrissy had died and Paul had died, and she would make fun of it in a way that would totally crack me up. She'd go, "You're on an amazing weight loss plan, girl," because I couldn't eat and I was losing weight, and she'd go, "We got to write a book about this."
ah,
And that kind of humor works for me. And I
mm.
often teach it to people like, if you can laugh at yourself and laugh at your situation, you are shifted into a higher frequency. And when I got my cancer diagnosis, well, I raised my kids and my beautiful husband, Gene, to when we're having a bad day, we go find a great comedy movie or something and watch it together and laugh. And it just helps so much. So, my family, we have this array of favorite comedies that we'll watch if we're having a bad day. So, when I was alone in the hospital room that night after getting the worst diagnosis I could ever get, according to my idea of that, I put on my favorite comedy called Ghost Town with Ricky Gervais that came out a long, long time ago. You've probably none of you have ever seen it,
No,
but he has a near-death experience and from then on sees dead people. And he
I think I did see
fights
that
it
one.
and resists it, and he's so funny about it. But the movie ends with this beautiful moment of him recognizing that they're just trying to help, their loved ones who are still here. And he goes around delivering those healing messages to the people who are still here. It's such a beautiful comedy, and you laugh your butt off through the whole thing. So that night, I was alone in my hospital room on my iPhone watching that movie and laughing. And the nurse would come in and go, "Are you okay?"
Right.
And
What's wrong with you? Why are you laughing right now?
I'd say if I can laugh in this moment, I can get through this. And that's how I think of it. In our worst moments, if we can find one little thing to make us laugh, it's God showing us that we're going to get through this, that there's a way through it. And when Chrissy died and she came to me, which I just want to share that story quickly because
Yeah.
it's about humor. I had been so devastated by Chrissy getting leukemia, and then she'd had a bone marrow transplant, and then she went into remission. And so I thought she was doing okay. And I had then moved to Mexico, as I told you earlier. I really don't recommend that if you're grieving. But anyway, so I was in my little apartment in Mexico with, no phone. You couldn't call the States back then unless you went through this huge rigmarole. And one Christy came to me and just all night was making me laugh. And all night she was showing me our high school friends, our grade school friends. and making me laugh so hard that my stomach was hurting, which is what
Oh,
she would always do because she was so funny. And and I woke up like even during the night going, wow, I'm with Chrissy. And then I woke up in the morning going, oh no, I was with Chrissy. And I finally got a call to the States, and her mom said she had crossed that night. And Chrissy came to show me that laughter is the frequency of God. The first thing she did out of her body was return to her humor and bring me along on that journey. We laughed all night together. And I know that was Chrissy's way of showing me that the humor is so important here on earth.
that so neat. I'm going to quote you because I love this. Love that broth. I think if anyone just hears this out of context, they won't understand it. But I love that. Hey, and Ricky Gervais, so snarky. He and
Right.
the stuff that he produces, it's really well written. What do you have any other recommendations specifically about shows or
Oh
that you
gosh, yes.
really think are good? Yeah,
Any
tell
of
us
you
some.
ever seen Soap Dish with Sally Field and Kevin Kline? These are 80s movies and 90s movies, but they're so hysterical. Or one of my favorites is Crimes of the Heart with Jessica Lange and Sissy Spacek. And they're so brilliantly written, and they are incredibly hysterically funny. And anything that you can watch that just gets you laughing and laughing and laughing, it's God's way of showing you, you got this. You're going to make it through this.
Thank you. What would you say? So, if there's someone here that's in the peak of the depth, to have gratitude for something can feel like such a stretch. Yet, would you say do it anyway? Fake
Yeah,
it till
well,
you make it,
I
or
work with grieving moms, and I really want to say to them that, first of all, be
Oop,
gentle on yourself if you're going through a devastating loss right now. Don't beat yourself up or judge yourself, whatever you're
mhm.
feeling. But the moment you begin to see a little opening, or maybe you suddenly walk outside and a part of you goes, well, it is a pretty day today. That's your little opening. And then you can go, ah, I'm grateful for that breeze. Oh, I'm grateful for this little thing. And even if at first you don't feel it, the more you begin to do that, go for a little gratitude walk where you kind of make yourself look at everything and be grateful for it, and then crack yourself up about it. You can, like, I'm always saying things like, all right, Sue, I know you're trying here, and you just kind of make yourself laugh and talk to yourself in that humor, silly, soft way. It's a way of lifting your frequency. And then with grief, also remember that your departed loved one wants you to be laughing. They want you to feel better. They're not in the divine realms going, you better grieve for me. No, those spirits are always going, come on, lift up, lift up. This is all okay. This is all part of our life plan and our soul agreement. And you agreed to this. So come on, I'm trying to make you laugh. That's what the spirits do. And then here we often think, well, if I laugh, I'm disrespecting them or something. No, that's not how it works in the divine realms. Crack yourself up and think about how your loved one would have wanted to crack you up and make you laugh, and do that.
Great. And Laurie said to everyone about the shows, I'll put those movie recommendations in my queue. Reverend Sue, can you tell us like how is sacred numerology guiding us through the dark night of the soul?
Oh, I tell you, it's to me, it's the most helpful tool because it shows us, oh, I agreed to learn this specific thing here in this lifetime. So what I'm going through is actually helping me do what I came to do. And when we have our soul review at the end of the life, we're going to look back at it with love, but we're going to say, wow, what was I afraid of? Why was I resisting those lessons so much? Why was I not loving so much? Why was I carrying that anger and victimhood through the whole thing? And we don't want to graduate with that. We want to graduate and go, well, I gave it my best. I opened my heart. I was as courageous and loving as I could be. Yeah, I had my pitiful moments, but I always found a way to return to the light. And you want to be able to say, well, I traveled my path with all the courage and heart I could muster. That's all we're asked to do.
How do we rewrite our soul plan to rise above the greatest challenge with the dark night of the soul?
Well, I am a soul regression therapist, and I take clients every day into the divine to have that conversation with their guides and their counsel and say, what is my soul trying to learn in this? Is there any way I can change it? And often there is a little bit of wiggle room. So, for example, if we're getting the lesson quickly, we're asking the right questions and going, oh, this is to show me such and such, then there is a more graceful way through the dark nights rather than being way down in the pain and the victimhood of it. And it also can be seen in our birth path in numerology. Every path we choose has a high frequency to it and a lower frequency to it. And that's our free will. The destiny is, yes, this is what our life plan is. This is what we came to learn. But along the way, our free will determines if we're going to live to the high frequency of that path or wallow in the lowest frequency of it. So even in my path of the 22-4, I was very lost in the drudgery of the 4, and the 4 has a low frequency of simply work for work's sake. You
Mhm.
just get down in the trenches and you can't even remember your name. You're working so hard, and it doesn't serve you in the long run. And the 22 calls us to shift up to that bigger picture. And so I knew when I had my soul path meeting with my guides, they said, you've accomplished your soul plan that you set for this lifetime. But if you want to stay, this is what you've got to teach and shift up to moving forward. And that for me has to do with my angelic realm work with the angelic ministry and the classes I teach about that, because they have a huge message for humanity. Yes, I still do my numerology and I still work with clients and I still teach a lot of the same things, but I also now bring this angel wisdom in. That was a big part of my opening in my soul plan rewrite.
Hmm. I have two questions. T- Do you mind telling us about angels, your perspective
Yeah.
of them?
Well, I grew up Catholic, and in the Catholic tradition, it's so interesting. I wasn't that attracted to them. I was much more attracted to Mother Mary, the divine feminine. And I think back on it and I think, well, most of the angels in the Catholic tradition are these men, Michael and Gabriel and all these people. And I was so drawn to the female deities. And now we know that so much of the Bible was completely rewritten and written by men and everything, and that women were diminished in those stories. Well, angels are non-gender. They are non-binary beings. They are beings of light. And when I have ever opened up to it, those beings of light have always been with me. Even in this vision in 2014, it was the beings of light showing me this and teaching me this. And then a year ago, exactly, an angel showed up in my room. I even have pictures of it. It's on my website. It's in my classes. And this angel communicated with me and said that she was my angelic realm mother, and just started teaching me how to shift up and connect with the angelic beings. They are our first responders on earth. They don't judge us. They are here to help us, to lift us up. But we do have to kind of ask sometimes. Like sometimes if we're locked down in our pain and we're just not opening up at all, if we just take a breath and say, angels, lift me up, you will simply right away feel that angelic energy wrapping around you and lifting you into a higher frequency. And since I acknowledged that, they have come into my life in every single way. And they show up for me all the time now. And yes, we have our guides, and there is God and all these other layers of divine beings. But the angels are so easy. They are here to help us constantly. Think of them as our paramedics here. They're going to be the first ones to arrive when we're in trouble. We might need to open the door and say, okay, you're welcome. But once we do that, they just comfort us and love on us and soothe us. And especially in this troubled time in the world, We can send angels to all of these hard places that we're seeing unfold on earth, to the conflict, to the war, to our loved ones who are suffering. And the angels will be the first to begin that nurturing, healing work for the humans.
Oh, I really enjoy you calling them like paramedics, first responders. I think that's such a clear vision of them. All right, let me ask you this, and knowing that our we're coming close to closing, and tell me if this is appropriate in terms of a divine sacred number or numbers. What would you say to that?
Well, I have a different take on numerology than a lot of numerologists out there. Every number has its sacred energy. However, there are three, especially the double numbers, the repeated numbers that are recognized as little signs from angels. I especially focus on the 11, the 22, and the 33. For example, I had a client yesterday whose son was on the 33 Master Soul path, and he really struggled to be here on earth because he was so sensitive and so not of this earth. 33 is such a high frequency journey, and he crossed over in his early 20s. It was so helpful to this mom to realize, yeah, my son was an angel. He didn't fit in here. He was on that 33 Master Soul, and it helps her and it helps anyone grieving to understand that sometimes we come in on such a high frequency here, and it's manifested in our birth path and in the numbers that show up around us, that we're not fit for a long lifetime here. And even when I was in the hospital going through surgery, I was randomly assigned to a room number 3311, two
Ah,
sacred numbers. And
wow.
when I saw that, it was just like a little nudge from the universe and the angels going, "You're not alone in this. Don't be a victim here. You're being lifted up." And so look for those signs, because sacred numbers are here to remind us that we are constantly loved on and lifted up by the divine beings, that we are not alone.
Right now, I love 1111. I'm seeing that a lot, which again, it's very in, we can get really down. I don't care who you are, if you're incredibly spiritual, like there are things. And every time I see that, it's like just reassurance that
Right.
everything's going to be okay. All right. This may be a big question, but I don't, maybe we'll end with this. What, what are your thoughts on suicide?
I work with so many parents whose children crossed intentionally. I don't even like to say the words commit suicide. It's like commit. That's what you do to a crime or a
Yeah.
sin. Forget
Hmm.
that. If a soul is at a place in their life where they even sense, and we all do sense when our exit is coming, we have pre-programmed exits. And if we're sensing that it's coming, there are souls who will take their life. They sense that it's the end of their time here. And if they'd stayed, there might have been a car accident or some other way they would have crossed. It was simply their exit point. And there are no accidents here. Nobody crosses over accidentally. There are too many divine beings guarding the veil who go, up, it's not your time, go back.
Hmm.
Because I've interviewed so many NDE
Hmm.
experiencers who had a million knife stab wounds and were bleeding out, and they crossed over, and the divine beings were going, nope, you got to go back. So if it's our time, then we go. And it's almost irrelevant how we go. And the way our culture judges suicide, we have to let that go. We absolutely have to.
I think that was beautiful to end on, because what you're also working on doing is changing these paradigms of victimhood, of grief, of suicide, of death, of all of that. All right, so I'm gonna get my script right here and head us out. Hey, thank you so much for everyone for joining us for this journey through the shadows of darkness and life, with Reverend Sue Frederick. And Sue's courses, I'm going to put those in again: How to Get Through the Dark Night of the Soul, and her other Humanity Stream Plus masterclass classes, Sacred Numerology and Your Life Through a Divine Lens, now available on the Stream Plus platform. So join Stream Plus to gain immediate access to these beautiful programs, and you'll see. And let me plug this in too. We are proud to say that Humanities Stream Plus is the largest global streaming platform for conscious raising. That's just incredible. And you can come in at any price, whatever you can afford. I also want to thank Steve Farrell, Dee Meyer, and the production team, Jim Gray, Garth Catterall, Nanette Kennedy, and the rest of Humanities team. Sue, I'm going to put my pencil down. It has been such a pleasure. Thank you for all that you do and you keep doing.
Oh, you're so beautiful. It
Gratitude.
was an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, thank you so much. I have gratitude for this moment and gratitude for all of you being here. I'm looking at everybody today. All right, over and out. Until next time.